Welcome to the Curiosity Couch. Please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, or you might miss future videos. Let me tell you a story that happened when I was 13 years old. I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood, where there weren't many black people. I attended school and spent my days just like any other 13-year-old. However, one day a boy named Joey came to our school and was placed in my class. Joey was black. In fact, he was the only black person in our entire school, and he stood out like a sore thumb. But he was just an ordinary boy like me, with similar interests in sports, comic books, and video games. Unfortunately, my 13-year-old self didn't understand that. In my eyes, Joey looked repulsive, and I thought he was unnatural. I didn't hate him, but I felt disgusted by him because of his skin color. I wasn't alone. Many of my classmates gossiped about him too, apparently sharing my opinion. Thinking it was all fun and games, we started to harass him almost every day, like hiding his school bag or giving him funny names. We thought it was just harmless pranking, but in reality, it was plain bullying. Joey endured it all, never getting angry or calling anyone out. He silently put up with it until everyone grew bored and stopped. I too eventually stopped, but my repulsion never went away. I started to avoid Joey, trying to pretend he wasn't there. Around that time, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air started airing, and about a year later, our school had more black students, which led to many controversies. As a young boy, I didn't pay much attention to these events. At first, I didn't like the show because, for the same reason, I didn't like Joey. I felt repulsed by the black actors. However, my mother enjoyed the show, and we only had one TV, so I had no choice but to watch it with her. Eventually, I started to enjoy the show too, and I got over my repulsion towards black actors. However, I still held some repulsion against black people in real life. I was more engaged with the comedy of the show, and it wasn't until later that the show started to teach viewers important lessons in subtle ways. I don't remember the exact episode, but there was one episode where Will and Carlton talked about their experience being stopped by the police. Will was upset and started to explain about racial profiling and discrimination. Carlton, who came from a wealthy upbringing and a nice neighborhood, didn't understand why Will was so upset. Will sarcastically told Carlton that the police stopped them because they didn't have a map, not because of their skin color. Will sarcastically told Carlton that the police stopped them because they didn't have a map, not because of their skin color. This scene stuck with me, and I thought about it for weeks. I also thought about Joey and all the things we did to him. I wondered how he must have felt, and why I did those things when he never did anything to me. I pondered these thoughts for a month until I couldn't take it anymore. One day during our lunch break, I decided to talk to Joey. He was still the only black person in our class, and he was a loner. I found him in the cafeteria eating a radish sandwich, which I also liked. I felt incredibly awkward approaching him and making small talk, so I waited until most of our classmates had left. When I finally got up the courage to sit next to him, Joey immediately noticed me but didn't say anything. An entire lunch break passed, and we didn't say a word to each other. Looking back, I'm sure it was an uncomfortable experience for both of us. When Joey and I were much older, I asked him what he thought when I did that thing to him. He told me that he thought I was about to harass him, and that he was actually the most nervous he had ever been compared to everything else he had experienced. He had never had anyone sit next to him like me, silent as a rock without knowing what I would do. We laughed our asses off. Anyway, this continued for about 4 days where I would sit next to Joey during lunch break without saying a word. I didn't know what to say exactly because asking for forgiveness isn't easy for kids with their stubborn minds. But after the 3rd day, I couldn't bear it anymore. During lunch break, I sat next to him with my own lunch and immediately spoke before he could start eating. I'm sorry. What? He asked. I'm sorry, I repeated. For what? He asked. I'm sorry for doing the things I did to you, I said. He started eating, but I didn't eat at all. I waited, expecting to hear more from him, but he didn't say anything else. He simply ate while I looked at him, waiting for the words I expected to hear. He noticed me staring at him expectantly, and stopped eating before turning to me. What? He asked. So you forgive me? I asked. No, he replied. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation. I was dumbfounded and had no idea what to say next. Joey didn't seem to want to talk anymore and simply finished his lunch while I did too. For the next week, I pondered about what to do next. Joey had refused my apology, and I was clueless about what to do. But I continued to have lunch with Joey every day, and we started talking about hobbies like comics and video games. My repulsion towards him disappeared as I started to understand Joey as a person, and we became pretty tight friends. We even went over to each other's houses and played. My original friends also became more friendly with Joey once I started to invite and play with him more. This continued until our high school years and even until university, as both Joey and I attended the same university studying different fields. I studied geology, and he studied chemistry. We stayed friends our entire lives, and the reason I'm writing this post is that Joey recently got married and asked me to become his best man. I told the same story at his wedding. We got pretty drunk that night, and I asked him how being a married man was like. He replied that he couldn't be happier. We got even drunker, and I asked him if he had ever forgiven me after all these years. He told me that even after all these years, he still hadn't forgiven me. He said that I was his best friend and that he would never forgive me. He would hold this grudge until we both became old men, and that I had to always stay with him so that I would one day forgive myself instead of asking him something so irrelevant. And just like that, we are here. I am writing this post in an effort to do exactly that. I don't want to keep this up until Joey and I both become old men. I'd rather leave something like this behind instead of keeping it with me. I hope others can learn something from this story. I think I'll always be racist, and Joey knows this. But I truly love my best friend. He is a black man.